So one of the big reveals that I already did a video about from the End of Dragons live stream is that they are looking at strikes for the End of Dragons era. There are going to be certain bosses we fight against in the story that then come back as a strike mission, and the strike mission itself will have a CM too. This was my favorite news from the stream. I think this is a really good way for the studio to support endgame and hardcore endgame for those high-end PvE players moving forwards. I think we see that it's been proved in other MMOs very well. I did a whole discussion on why strike missions are so brilliant on another video. Maybe you guys want to check out. Today, I want to get you guys just as inspired as I am and give you a little bit of a sense of what amazing things the devs could do with this system, particularly with regard, and this is what really excites me, to propping up existing content that's in the game that could be amazing if it was just tuned to be a more interesting 10-man co-op experience. So here I've created my top 10, kind of 11 really, favorite ideas for strikes Guild Wars 2 should have and could have if they really go for this and the community ends up going for them. So let's run in, first of all, with number 11. Now, the first three that I want to talk to you guys about are kind of categories, really. And so this opening category, in general, is living world bosses that you probably forgot about. So one of the big problems with the game I've seen is that they release a Living World episode. It's really focused on high quality, interesting story that you do once, maybe twice for some side achievements, if you didn't immediately get them by accident on your first time through. And then you leave it and you forget about it completely. Maybe you're a lapsed player during that Living World episode and you forget just how badass some of this stuff has been. So, here are some good examples for you guys. In Living World Season 4, and I was particularly inspired here because Cameron Rich, the team lead who's working on the End of Dragon strike missions, made this content. Think about it in Season 4 with the Omakhan, where we have that amazing arena fight against the Exterminator Golem. There were a lot of really beautiful ground targets and phases and interesting ideas going on with this specific fight. When was the last time you guys did it? How many of you guys really remember how the fight flows through? Well, I see this as a perfect sized arena for 10 people to actually really get back into these mechanics and play them on kind of a more repeatable scale. This would be brilliant. Another fight I think that is really interesting is the Caudicus battle. Caudicus battle, when it came out, was originally tuned to be quite difficult for veteran players and people with good builds. I think we kind of breezed through it, but a huge number of the community couldn't really hit that bar, and the devs kind of had to nerf it away. So once upon a time, it was a really interesting fight. The Luda narrative here was quite strong. We've been hearing about how powerful and dangerous Caudicus had been politically, but also just in terms of the strength that he'd obtained recently. We had a great fight that matched that and gave us a sense of that. Then unfortunately it had to be nerfed away, and rightly so. It was a core Living World beat. Well, I want to get the real Caudicus fight back, and hey, why not, while we're at it, really build it up and make it into a cool 10-man instance. They don't necessarily have to include all the spinning puzzle rooms and stuff at the same time, but they had a lot of fun stuff going on around here with the White Mantles summoning skeletons and so on. I'd like to see that come back. Just about every season of Living World has a brilliant fight. My main choice for Season 2 is the Shadow of the Dragon. There are actually two big boss sequences against this creature, one of them at the Grove, and then once again at the very end of the season, just before Heart of Thorns start, you fight it in the Golden Cave that was kind of hinting at exalted activity in the area and so on. It's actually the second of the two fights that I'm more interested in. It's not that the one at the Grove's bad, it's just that there's really a lot more movement. The arena size is really nice for that second fight. Many of you guys may be familiar and remember this one because of the big Living World replay that we're going through right now. I mean, in a perfect world, you would have the strike mission be one of these fights, and when you do CM, there's a whole other phase, and it's the other variation. I mean, how cool would that be? Sort of like what they did with the Sorrowful Spellcaster at the top of the Sunqua Peak fractal very recently. When you go into CM, you get a whole new version of the fight. Well, maybe they can do stuff like that here. And as a candidate for Season 1 as well, since we're canvassing them all, let's look at Scarlet on the Breachmaker. Actually, a really interesting fight. So easy to forget about. A lot of how Season 1 ended is really rich for repurposing into new content. We did just get the Marionette comeback as kind of another format, not a strike mission, an open world instant Zerg thing. And I think that a lot of the Lion's Arch stuff is more appropriate for that, like the evacuation of Lion's Arch, the recapturing, and the actual assault on the Breachmaker itself. But when we actually get up there and we're looking at Scarlet, well, maybe this can somehow become something of a strike mission. Maybe the arena's a little bit small on this one, but that's definitely the one big thing I think they haven't still repurposed. A lot of that other stuff ended up coming in as fractals and stuff, which I do think is more appropriate. So that's my first category. Another category, really easy to talk about, the tutorial bosses. No, seriously, I remember as Guild Wars 2 was coming out, they would always do a tour where you would go through the tutorial and there'd be some big fight at the start, and it was this epic thing how Guild Wars 2 throws you in on the action straight away, and immediately you're having these epic experiences against these big creatures. Except obviously, with the decisions they've made over the years, especially how you're actually immune to death now during those fights, they're not really the epic experiences that I want them to be. And I don't necessarily think that you need to make something super hard at the end of the tutorial, even though forcing people to learn to dodge might be kind of nice early on. And we do need to remember as well that these tutorial bosses are by and large repurposed as world bosses already. Like, you have the Hands of Olgoth that you can fight again out in the Harathi hinterlands. The Mark II Golem you can fight again out in Mount Maelstrom. Duke Baradin kind of reappeared in Season 2, but nonetheless, the idea of them just as focused 10-man strike experiences. I mean, think of the Golem. Look at this footage here. It's such a perfect, beautifully sized arena to have some kind of cool fight. Either they would do this as strikes, or I can also kind of see those poppable world boss consumables coming back, and you do it kind of as a bigger Zerg thing, again, a bit like the Marionette, and you do the open world equivalents, but I think these are all a really cool idea. Next, speaking of world bosses, let's look at what's right from world bosses just themselves. Do you know who I always have a lot of nostalgia for, that I think there's actually a lot of interesting elements to the fight and phases? It's one of the first world bosses many of us ever saw and ever fought, the Shadow Behemoth in the God's Lost Swamp. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to pop him at any particular moment and fight him as a strike mission? Living Worlds had some great world bosses too, like the death-branded Shatterer in Jahai Bluffs. A lot of you guys might be forgetting already, but they have a lot of stuff going on there with interesting ads, break bar phases, gliding-based mechanics and interactions as you fly through the air using special action abilities. But really, I think the main meta event out in the open world that I'm most interested in seeing as a strike mission is a Path of Fire one. The Path of Fire metas tend to get a bad rap as not being that repeatable or being kind of low quality, and to be honest, I sort of agree with that. In many situations, there isn't too much going on. But the meta I really love is the Forged Foundry in the Domain of Vabi. It's called Forged with Fire. If you guys have never played it, it is fantastic. There's like several bosses you fight during it, including the 2 Hounds of Balthazar, loads of amazing suck mechanics and shockwaves and light shows filled with bullet hell style projectiles everywhere. Unfortunately, as a thing in the open worlds, generally you just see these things die. As a strike mission, it would be so perfect. These are really my biggest candidates as far as world bosses are concerned. Moving into number 8 here, I have something kind of tangential to meta events and world bosses. They are world bosses and they are meta events, but they kind of exist separately. A lot of us don't think about or do them anymore. And that's the God Temples in Ore from way back at Core. I find these really compelling, specifically because the actual creatures you fight at the end of each temple, the God statues, corrupted and possessed by Zaitan as they are really beautifully animated, incredibly intricate looking designs. They actually also have been kind of reused. If you play the final path of the ruined city of Ara, you'll find you kind of go through them again. But seeing them in that 10-man, massive scale environment, that's what I really want. A lot of the temples are pretty basic, just like some kind of an escort and then wave assault or something. But my favorite temple of them all, by far, is the Lissa Temple. What an incredible set piece. Imagine having 10 players and you're deciding who goes to defend which battery. Each battery has its own mechanics. Sometimes you assign people to go and deal with all the trebuchets and stuff that are spawning in the central areas. You got that amazing look away mechanic. You have the idea of aggroing away all of the risen gorillas that would otherwise CC lock you, and DPSing Lissa until eventually the batteries come back out, and all the different techniques and strategies people could utilize for that would be so goddamn cool. I kind of believe in just doing the Lissa Temple, except all the other god statues appear during the course of the fight as well, and you could have one hell of a strike mission. Really fantastic. Moving on. There are a couple of big story bosses that I didn't mention a second ago because I really do view them as being in a tier all of their own. And the first one I want to mention now is Balthazar. This is a funny one because, in all honesty, I feel like the end of Path of Fire and that Balthazar fight already has so many cool mechanics and ground targets and things happening that I'm pretty satisfied by it as it stands. When I think about a future of strike missions with Guild Wars 2, I sort of view the best things that the studio should go for are propping up currently weak content. Is the Balthazar boss fight really weak? Well, no, it works really well, but the idea of it being extra difficult, with a bunch of friends to play it, with all the cinematic atmosphere that's going on there, with Kralkatorrik in the sky and so on, and the potential to combine the Balthazar fight with the previous fight against, you know, the Great Machine that Aurene was captured in, I think that there's something really, really beautiful there. And besides, we're fighting a god, guys. A goddamn god. I feel like having that as a repeatable function of the game, where we don't forget about it as years go by, is something really, really impactful to me. I could be swung either way. Maybe you could also say it loses its impact if you make it repeatable. But I think Balthazar as a strike mission is just too perfect. Look at this goddamn fight. Moving on to number 6, and I rank this idea higher because the current implementation is so bad. It's Blightghast the Plaguebringer at Claw Island. People might not be very familiar with it at this point, but a lot of the core Guild Wars 2 story builds to this idea of Lion's Arch standing in defiance of the dragons, and Zhaitan takes a swipe at them, knocks out Claw Island, and puts this great dragon there. You guys remember how a year after launch they added LFG and the Torquatal Rising patch with the amazing tidal wave and all the turrets to defend, and, you know, again, like a battery phase? There was a lot that they did with Torquatal Rising, but really, I don't see Torquatal as a strike mission thing. People love that as an open world meta, and it's just too big. There's too much going on. You really do need probably even more than 10 people. But Blightghast, as he's fought on Claw Island, it's the perfect size for a 10-man experience. It's a big moment in the story. It's a chance we can get all that flavor from original Torquatal Rising back into the game, except here today. And so for that reason, it's really high on my list. It's just such a letdown that the fight resolves itself. You can literally AFK the Blightghast fight. So seeing him as a strike mission would be pretty badass. Next, I have a Living World Season 3 instance. Many of us have probably just replayed it. I had a little tweet about this because I'm running the Arc DPS incoming damage add-on that shows me the names of skills that I'm being hit by. It's Timey's game. Yeah, you guys might not remember this, but for a brief moment in Season 3, Timey takes you into like this virtual reality arena, which you can participate in battles against destroyers. And the idea is it's like Rat and Novus tech, and we're trying to figure out what they learned about competing against Primordus's minions. And there's a very fun moment in the middle of it where you fight a super adventure box boss. I think he's called the Destroyer of Bananas. It's a giant monkey fight, guys. Now, I'm all for really unique feeling, interesting enemy designs that you don't get elsewhere. You take that stuff, make it repeatable, and it feels as distinct as you could possibly get it. And the idea of a really interesting fight against a super adventure box monkey that's throwing bananas and stuff at you is awesome. The fight's already there, it's over in a second, because again, it's a Living World story instance where there's really no meat to the experience. I would love to see this as a strike mission. And there are actually mechanics going on there too, you know. There's sometimes water appears in the arena that you can walk into for, I think, a bit of a heal and a knockback on all the destroyers in the area. They could do fun things, and it's just kind of a weird, goofy, gimmicky idea that I think would put up a smile on people's faces. Next, for number 4, a similar idea was still in Season 3. What was another really big, interesting story fight, had profound effect on the lore, but like, say, the Caudicus fight was, but unlike Caudicus, who's just kind of a human, has also got a really interesting enemy design, like the Destroyer of Bananas? Well, it's Lazarus the Dyer. I mean, come on. There's a proper Massart fight that we get to participate in at the bottom of an interesting arena, Abaddon's Reliquary. Abaddon's Reliquary itself has those weird, I can't even, Keepers of Secrets, I think they're called, like crazy-styled golems you don't see anywhere else in the game. Again, has fun ground telegraphs and mechanics. This thing hits every beat for what I think would be a beautiful strike. I'd love to see it. And so now we come to the top 3. And believe it or not, the top 3 for me all have a unifying theme. This is the order I'd like to present them in. First, it's a world boss. It's a Heart of Thorns world boss. By and large, I think Heart of Thorns did all of its world bosses very well, except the last one in Dragon's Stand. I'm talking about the Mouth of Morgemoth. Now, don't get me wrong, the Mouth of Morgemoth is a pretty cinematic fight, but as far as it's actually designed and played out in-game right now, I actually think it's a terrible world boss. I mean, think about it, guys. There's all these amazing set pieces. There's the idea of fighting Blade Master Diardmid and Axe Master Harith and all that. There's those phases. There's the concept of protecting all the islands, and you kind of got an idea for an enrage there, which is slowly you run out of ground, and eventually when they've all been destroyed, you lose because there's nowhere less to stand. You have, yes, the bite phase. You have the slam phases. You got all this amazing stuff, but what does it really boil down to when you do that in the open world? just one idea, and that's slow burning the CC while you do as much damage as possible, and you get one opportunity to damage him, really, 1 point, and then the rest of it, you're just standing around. There's no real risk. The fight would have to go on so long before you see those islands get destroyed, but the ideas that are at play there, if they were just calibrated a little bit different, if they were just rebalanced so that the damage you do to the boss is not just in this one phase, but filtered out through over many of the phases, if there was more of a risk of losing the islands, if you had less players so your decision making on where you defend and why changed a bit, oh my god, we could have something really beautiful in our hands. And it's an Elder Dragon fight too. I mean, kind of. There's also the inside phase with Morgemoth himself. Maybe you have that Sunqua Peak thing going on again, where you fight the mouth of Morgemoth outside, and if you do the CM, a whole new phase unlocks where you're actually fighting the mental version of him too. And you get some extra stuff to wrestle with. This is a really rich idea for a strike mission. And what did I just say for Balthazar? Come on, that's a god fight. Here we have an Elder Dragon fight, which the franchise up until now is predicated on. I would love to see these moments be powerful gameplay more than anything else. And well, now you might start to see my theme for the top 3. I have next Dragon Storm. Yeah, the death of 2 Elder Dragons at once, Jormag and Primordus, the most impactful, meaningful story beat. The devs have already committed to having it as being replayable gameplay, so why not let's have it with some meaty experiences that kick back. I mean, it's there in the Icebrood Saga too. You would have hoped they'd do it as a strike mission. It's funny, when this came out, obviously I did so much discussion about what a disappointment this patch was to me, but there was a little moment where I tweeted that I had been hit by an ability from Primordus. Primordus has a skill called Apocalypse Rain, and on the tweet it was like, Apocalypse Rain did like 300 damage to my character. And it wasn't that I was playing a tanky character or anything like that. It's just that it was calibrated to be so weak, so irrelevant, and it just didn't line up with what you'd want from 2 Elder Dragons at once. No, sorry, 3 Elder Dragons at once in that fight, because Aurene is present there too. Not to mention the cool stuff with Bram and Ryland, seeing them duke it out, more interesting gameplay that kicks back. This would be beautiful and rectify one of the lowest points of the whole franchise for me. What was the other low point of the franchise? Also Elder Dragon related. What could beat Dragonstorm? And it's funny, because in many ways, maybe Dragonstorm should be high on this list. I gotta say, for number 1, it's gotta be the Zhaitan fight, right? Look at the Zhaitan fight. Look at the glory of Tyria. How perfectly sized it is for 10 people, that maybe at various times you split between the lower and the upper decks. You have the cannon phase that you're defending. You have all the clearly cut out sections as cutscenes just chain back to back. What was ArenaNet's original plan here? For a while, there was like a bug fix that added some interesting little Zhaitan worms that again are bugged and don't appear now. There's the idea on the world map that there's a whole extra phase to the fight we never saw. The Elder Dragon's Lair with that mysterious point of interest that you can mouse over but can never actually get to. It could be like the Mouth of Morgemoth thing, where it's CM gets the extra phase where you go and do that final moment at the POI, again like the Sunqua Peak thing. They could do all the dragon fights as strike missions and have that added extra little thing. Where's Traherne in this final fight with Calibolg? Do we get to see Destiny's Edge actually impact the battle? This is such a lowlight, and it's coming up on 10-year-long lowlight for the franchise. I would love to see a real Zhaitan fight, and I think seeing that realized as a strike mission with a CM would be just about one of the most badass things that this format could offer. So yeah, Dragonstorm maybe deserves the top spot, but Zhaitan has been such a long story for me that, you know, I gotta give it to him. So there you have it, guys. Those are just some cool ideas for a variety of strike missions that we could, you know, imagine there's some kind of roulette system where every day we jump in and different ones are showing up. Could be really, really, really fun. So that's kind of what I think about strikes. Hopefully you guys are on board with these ideas. Obviously, if you don't like the concept at all, this isn't going to get you going. But anyone who's ever enjoyed raiding or some of the more interesting PvE that they've done in the past, if you do have that time to sink in the game, I'm sure you'll see. ArenaNet already have so much music and assets and animations and fun ideas at play that they could just look back at and give us some really, really fun content. Obviously, rewards are another side of the story. A lot of you guys won't be inspired until you hear, oh, I can get legendary armor from this, or there are legendary trinkets I can get from, you know, some of these big boss fights. But if they can get us going back to fight gods and elder dragons and all these ideas regularly with brilliant rewards, I mean, what a great future for Guild Wars, I think. So there you have it, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you for the trailer analysis on the big news on the next End of Dragons Daily. Let me know if you think I missed any cool concepts. A big favorite boss that wasn't said here? Let me hear it. I'm willing to listen. And I'll see you for the next one very soon.